Welcome to Perspectives with Avery. In this video I'll be laying out my reasoning for saying that Trump is a fascist. I'll be providing the definition of fascism and describing how he meets all 14 of the personal characteristics of a fascist. I'll do that by comparing some of the things he has said and done with those of the world's most infamous fascist, Adolf Hitler. If you enjoy this video, click like, subscribe and ring that notification bell. Share your comments below and please share this video. Now, let's get to work. The Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines fascism as a populist political philosophy, a movement or regime that exalts nation and often race above the individual. It is associated with a centralized autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader, and that is characterized by severe economic and social regimentation and by the forcible suppression of opposition. In an article published in the Free Inquiry magazine in spring of 2003 by Dr. Lawrence Brit, a political scientist, Brit defined 14 characteristics of fascism. Number one is a powerful and continuing nationalism. Fascists constantly use patriotic sounding mottos, slogans, symbols, songs and other paraphernalia. Flags are everywhere. We saw such things in Hitler's Germany, and we see them today in Trump's supporters' front yards, on their cars, their clothing, mugs, running shoes, etc. Number two is a disdain for the recognition of human rights. Hitler is infamous for trampling all over human rights by implementing policies such as the execution of disabled people who he referred to as useless eaters. Like Hitler, Trump has no respect for human rights. He's called for the police to be given greater powers, such as the right to beat the living daylights out of peaceful protesters. He appointed Christa fascists to the Supreme Court with the express intent of removing a woman's right to exercise bodily autonomy by overturning Roe v. Wade. He had the police use tear gas on peaceful protesters because he wanted to walk across the road for a photo opportunity of him holding a Bible, a book that he has never read, holding it outside of a church. Number three is the identification of enemies or scapegoats as a unifying cause. Hitler is infamous for demonizing the Jews, referring to them as vermin and saying that they were poisoning the blood of the country. One of the first things that Trump did after coming down that escalator in 2015 was to demonize Mexicans and Muslims. He called Mexicans rapists and drug dealers and said that they were flooding across the southern border taking American jobs. He wrongly believes that Muslims are terrorists whose only aim is to destroy American democracy. He bought into and repeated the debunked conspiracy theory that legal Haitian immigrants were eating cats and dogs. He has also repeated Hitler's slogan saying that immigrants are poisoning the blood of the country. Number four is the supremacy of the military. The Treaty of Versailles limited the German army to 100,000 men. After Hitler's rise to power in 1933, he immediately started to rebuild the German army, navy and air force, and by the end of World War II, about 18 million men had served in the German military. The US has the most powerful military that the world has ever seen. In 2017, the first year of Trump's regime, the military budget was $647 billion. By 2020, that had grown to $778 billion. It's currently $877 billion. China has the second biggest defense budget, spending $177 billion in 2019, while Russia is the fourth largest military budget, spending around $65 billion in 2019. To be fair to Trump, the US defense budget was disproportionately huge for decades prior to Trump entering politics. Number five is rampant sexism. Hitler was sexist, viewing women as baby factories to be used to produce blonde, blue-eyed Aryans, the so-called master race. Like Hitler, Trump is sexist. He constantly demeans women. He has said that he couldn't have sexually assaulted E. Jean Carroll because she's not his type. He referred to Stormy Daniels, a porn star with whom he had a sexual encounter, as horseface. He's an adjudicated sexual predator, which, according to the New York judge who presided over the case, is equivalent to a conviction for rape. He said he would be dating Ivanka if she wasn't his daughter. He constantly refers to Vice President Harris as stupid, incompetent and mentally disabled, saying that he thinks she was born that way. I find that last one particularly ironic, given his obvious cognitive decline, showing as he does all the signs of prefrontal dementia. Number 6 is control of the mass media. Hitler did control the mass media. In the 1930s and 40s, that was mostly radio and TV. There was a little bit of, radio and newspapers. There was a little bit of TV. Any media organisation or any reporter that said anything critical of him was shut down. Many reporters were thrown into internment camps, and many were either worked to death or executed. Fortunately, the US has the First Amendment, which provides for freedom of the press, so Trump can't shut down media organisations that criticise him. He gets around that by adopting another tactic used by Hitler. He calls them fake news. I'm certain that given the chance, Trump would shut down media organisations and imprison reporters who refuse to kowtow to him. Number 7 is an obsession with national security. All national leaders should be concerned about national security, but there's a difference between concern and obsession. Hitler rightly saw the Soviet Union as a threat to his country, and he considered his critics to be a threat to the country. He rebuilt the German military, signed a peace deal with the Soviet Union, which he later reneged on, and imprisoned or killed his critics. Trump has said that the threat to national security doesn't come from Russia or China. Instead, he said that the threat to national security comes from American citizens from within. It's American citizens that he sees as the threat. Hitler's critics weren't a threat to Germany, they were a threat to him. Trump's critics aren't a threat to America, they're a threat to him, because he knows that if he loses the 2024 election, he'll be able to do nothing about the pending prosecutions and likely convictions followed by his imprisonment in a federal penitentiary. Number 8 is that religion and government are intertwined. Despite what many Christians will tell you, Hitler was not an atheist. He was born into a Catholic family, was raised as a Catholic and never renounced it. In Mein Kampf and in his speeches, Hitler referred to doing the work of the Almighty. The Catholic Church openly supported Hitler and said that all Catholics should celebrate Hitler's birthday on the 20th of April every year. Many of the SS were Lutheran or Mennonite Christians. Trump, who I'm certain has never read the Bible, embraced evangelical Christianity not because of deeply held religious beliefs, but because he knew that he could get their vote by promising to overturn Roe v. Wade. Like many evangelical Christians, he wants to see the demolition of the wall of separation between church and state, and the evangelicals have said he is the second coming of Christ, that he was chosen by God to save America. Number 9 is that corporate power is protected. Hitler spent millions of Reichsmarks supporting corporations, particularly those engaged in manufacturing weapons of war. Trump could have done the same. Could have done things to truly help big corporations by, for example, introducing an infrastructure bill. He never did. Instead, he did 2 things to help them. Firstly, he cancelled many of the regulations that big corporations were expected to abide by and that cost them money, and secondly, he gave them a gigantic tax cut. The owners of those corporations, which includes himself, were the major beneficiaries of the tax cut, while the poor and the middle classes got very little. Number 10 is that labour power is suppressed. Hitler forcibly shut down all of the trade unions in Germany. He interned and imprisoned union leaders and activists. Some were executed. Trump hasn't done any of those things, but like the Republican Party, he has constantly criticised unions, union leaders and activists. He has praised Elon Musk for sacking striking workers. It's because of the unions that Americans have 40-hour work weeks, vacation time, paid sick leave for some, paid maternity leave for some, a living wage, overtime pay and, for some, healthcare. Trump would see all of that ended. Number 11 is that there is a disdain for intellectuals and for the arts. Hitler was not an intellectual and, like many others who were or are not intellectuals, he despised them. He had a disdain for intellectuals because they were far more intelligent than him and were usually the people most critical of him. They could see that what he was doing was going to lead to the downfall of Germany. Although he claims to be the smartest guy on the planet, Trump is not an intellectual by any stretch of the imagination. He has claimed that no one knows as much about taxation, healthcare, defence, business, foreign policy, etc. as he does. You pick a topic and you'd be almost certain to find a tweet somewhere where Trump claims that no one knows as much about that topic as he does. Number 12 is that there is an obsession with crime and punishment. Hitler considered his critics to be criminals. He issued edicts criminalising all sorts of actions that people might engage in. Actions such as going on strike, protesting in the streets and marrying a Jew. Trump is also obsessed with crime and particularly punishment. And like Hitler, if he gets a chance, he would punish striking workers and people engaged in peaceful protest against his government. He has said that the police should be allowed to beat the hell out of someone they detain or arrest, that the Central Park 5 should have been executed, and that people repeatedly illegally crossing the southern border should be executed. The only people Trump believes shouldn't be prosecuted for his crimes is Donald J. Trump and his sycophantic followers. Number 13 is that there is rampant cronyism and corruption. Hitler appointed cronies, people who sucked up to him and constantly praised him, and people who would willingly sacrifice their dignity and integrity in order to further their own ambitions. His choices for positions of power were often people who had no real knowledge or understanding of the position to which they were appointed. Like Hitler, Trump did exactly the same and worse because he practiced nepotism as well. He appointed Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, to deal with the problems in the Middle East, Betsy DeVos, a person who was opposed to public education, as the Secretary of Education, and he appointed his daughter as a chief advisor, and Bill Barr, a sycophant who had said that the president should be immune from prosecution, was appointed as Attorney General and who then misrepresented the findings of the Mueller report. Number 14 is that there are fraudulent elections. I'd add claims of fraudulent elections as well. After the death of President Hindenburg in 1934, a referendum was held. That referendum was to gain approval for the position of President and Chancellor to be merged. There was widespread voter intimidation and significant electoral fraud. Nazi stormtroopers were stationed at polling booths. Some polling booths were removed and many ballot papers were pre-marked as yes votes. Despite claims by Trump and his cronies, there was not widespread fraud in the 2020 election. There was no evidence presented by Trump and his sycophants to prove that there had been widespread fraud. No evidence of massive amounts of non-citizens or illegal aliens voting. No evidence of thousands of dead people voting. And no evidence of ballot papers being changed by voting machines. Trump lost 64 of the 65 lawsuits that he or his supporters, like Giuliani, filed. Instead of accepting his defeat, Trump has spent the ensuing years claiming the widespread fraud. He has also said that if he wins again, he will be a dictator on day one and that there will be no need for any more elections. Trump has pretty much done exactly the same sort of things that Hitler, the world's most infamous fascist, did. He has said the same sort of things that Hitler said. Trump displays all 14 of Dr. Brit's characteristics of a fascist. I'll leave you with these thoughts. Trump is a pathological liar. He's a malignant narcissist. He's not the great businessman that he claims to be, having had many of his business ventures go down the drain. He's not the best looking guy on the planet. He's not the fittest man on the planet. He's not the same weight as Chris Hemsworth, weighing at least 100 pounds more. He doesn't have a higher IQ than Einstein. He is the most incompetent and, in my opinion, the most corrupt president the United States has ever had and will go down in history as such. More corrupt than Buchanan, Andrew Johnson, Harding or Nixon. He belongs in a prison for the crimes he committed on January the 6th in 2021 and for his illegal retention of classified documents after he left the White House. He was convicted on 34 felony counts for illegal falsification of business records and should spend time in prison for that one too. Trump is not and should not be above the law. He should spend the rest of his life in prison where he belongs, paying for his very many crimes. If you like what I have to say, please hit like, subscribe and ring that notification bell. Comments, positive and negative, are welcome. Add them below and I'll do my best to respond. Thank you.